Okay, for this second video on the game framework, I wanted to bring up two things that I left off the last time and move that timer from the character to the two places, to the level blueprint and to the game instance. So you'll see still some communication between them, but a more appropriate place to put it and how you might have a different setting for this thing to make it more modular and flexible for each scene. So the things I left off were under the editor preferences and project settings. These you could pull up from this main map screen here, this tab. This heading, at least on my default setup, isn't on every type of window. So our editor preferences, I touched on, I think, in the UI setup. Doesn't really affect much, but one thing that I like to change all the time is to have things pop up in the main window whenever we're opening new things. Like, if you notice, when I go to the project settings, it didn't open up a separate window, it opened up a separate tab, brought it into this new window. Other settings that are, I think the file is like per user project settings or something, was this one where you do the save on compile so that you don't get compile and save, which sounds ridiculous, but just like having to drag that window into these tabs, having to click compile and save, all the little things that add one more click really pile up and do it a million times, and there's a bunch of instances of them. So that's really all that I've messed with editor stuff, at least for this project. But there's all kinds of customization. So project settings, though, the project settings will follow us all the way into our released packaged title. So a lot of this stuff I want to be blank because it has given me trouble, I think, with opening up the executable on other machines. It'll not trust them. I'm not sure if it has to do with the fact that it'll have HTML and email and phone numbers and stuff. Because basically it's like the configuration for this project, so it'll show our company name and the company website and so on. And we can put our project version, which would be really nice for the version control if we ever do get it set up, although I don't know if we'd even need to bother at that point. And source control, that's what they call it here. So anyway, these project settings we'll leave alone if that's cool until we get closer to the end of this thing, but throughout all of these are a lot of little things that are nice to be able to access, but a big one under the engine is the input. I know Dakota's done a lot in here to clean them up and add stuff for the different kinds of pawns, but you can see that each action mapping, which is like buttons, has all kinds of different options. Like this is, let's just pretend that was jump, and I wanted to have the space bar and the left trigger and the A button on the controller and the whatever different settings I want. You just add all the different options that you want to kick off that jump function. And then when I come into my pawn, I could just call jump. And I know I wasn't highlighting jump, but there is one up there that's called jump. So it just knows to get to this. And so if this pawn wants to like explode when you press jump, and some other pawn wants to actually jump, then you would just put jump on this pawn, jump on that pawn, and have different implementations for what happens when this character or this whatever does jump. So that was action mappings. Again, it's like buttons, and then axis mappings is anything analog, like a joystick or a mouse or a scroll wheel. Maybe not a scroll wheel. Anyway, it is going to constantly read this value, whereas if I press a button, it sends the 1. This is from a 0 to 1, and let's say I have my mouse moving. It might track the speed of that from 0 to 1. If I have my joystick pressed like halfway or angled like halfway from center, that might be a 0.5. But it's going to read that basically on tick, so it's going to read that 0.5 100 times a second, however fast. And if you had done that joystick action up here, which you can, and I move the joystick, it's only going to do it once. And then when I release it, that might be something that is telling it to reset and look again for the next time. So typically, though, the reason you have the axis is so that you can have a range of values, not just so that it's constantly checking, but it is a bit of both. And you can always override that in like the pawn. If I if I'm looking and I don't want it to move in a direction more than once until I decide to do it again. There's a do once thing. So if this is like the left joystick and I go to the left on it or go up on it, it would say do once, do whatever. So like move forward and then cut off that, stop looking for it basically, and reset it whenever I collect another thing that lets me look again or something. So the other big thing on the project settings, aside from input, is maps and modes up here under project. And this is the default. I talked earlier about the general thing, like do we want to override a game mode? We don't even have one set. And I think I said it before and it gets overridden, but it's kind of bad anyway right now because we don't want to, by default, jump into VR if I'm trying to test menus or running around with any mechanic in first person. But we'll set it up eventually for VR to be the default game mode. Our default pawns, maybe the VR character. And you'll notice there's no save on this. This is all automatically kept up with. So you can just close it like any other window and it's already caught up to date. So I think game mode is the default there. Anytime there's an option between game mode and game mode base or game instance base, whatever it is, ignore the base one. And above all, you just need to be consistent because these don't mix. So I think everything that I've created, I'm just using regular and not the base. Can't tell you any more than that because I don't know. This editor startup map I've changed a few times for pull requests so that the person can just open it up and go straight to the map, but that hasn't been consistent again because of our binary files thing getting overwritten. So it's the editor startup map and the game startup map, and if you ever, this will be what it is whenever the player does it. That way you can keep testing how you want, but have a separate way for whenever we package it, which we'll do hopefully this spring. And that's server stuff. Our game instance is set here, the Aeros game instance, but we'll never need to mess with that now. It's just a once thing. There's one other part to this. Maybe I'll figure it out and come back to it. So in the first person character, I created this countdown timer, and I didn't like it here. So basically the character doesn't know anything about this, doesn't care anything about this, it just doesn't belong here. It works, but if I go to a new level, I would have to get all kinds of fancy with making it make sense in that level too. So I'm going to see, these are all from the game instance. I don't see any variables created here, so it's just those custom events in the timer. And when I delete that custom event, it's gone. It's only there. I can only place it in one place. These things can't be in two places because snap turn delay is only going to do one thing for this character, so I couldn't make a new snap turn event or delay instance. Anyway, so if you delete it, it's gone. It's not like you just deleted this index and you can grab another one in. So I cut it so I can paste it later. I'm going to head over to the not the motion controller map, the UI test map. Almost always we'll want to save our changes, but I was messing around getting ready for this and I didn't want to. So here I am in the UI test map, and I'm going to open up the level blueprint. So when this level starts, it's already doing setting up the menus. And here is not the best example of this, but it's not bad. These begin plays can often get pretty gnarly, and this doesn't functionally help anything. It's kind of like white space. It just makes it easier to see what's going on. So it's all essentially the same, but this sequence is going to do this menu thing, and it's going to come down and set up this event. It's just easier to stack it and zoom around. So I would maybe say that this is set up, which isn't. This is going to be the level timer. So set timer by event. Let's see if there's any problems. This game instance wrap. Go ahead and make it 10. I think I can drag it up. Control. There's a way. Alright. Control and click will let you grab the execution pin off or the node off of that, the wire. Alt and click will disconnect it. Just a quick thing. So I'm going to make a new top one here for setting up the game instance ref. I've done this several times in the other video. I'm just going to game instance, convert this to a variable. Ref. Then the category is pretty overkill for this level blueprint because our level, I mean, you're not going to even use this one, but our levels probably won't be that complicated. So I'm still getting a compile error because I don't have this value. Current level duration looks like I do want to get out of this character. Shouldn't need that anymore. Current level duration. We need to right click away from this text. You see create a variable. If I click on the text, it lets me promote to a variable, but that's going to create a different variable than this. So I want to stay somewhere on this but off the text. Right click, create a variable, and it's popping up here. And now I should be good to go. So actually I'm going to change this a little bit, but this will still work. Kind of got ahead of myself here. So I'm going to grab the game instance, and I'm going to create a function for this in the game instance. So I'll call that here, and I'm going to use this level duration. As an input to the function. So let me head over to the game instance and cut this out one more time. So I'm going to call this. I want to make sure that we know that this isn't part of project really. So I'm naming this DevTool UI test. Countdown timer. No reason we can't use this, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense right now. So I want a custom event, and I'm going to call this. So I have one handle countdown timer. I need that separate because this event's going to call this thing, and I need it to start here. So I need a separate event. I need it to start before setting the timer. So I'm going to call this start countdown timer. So fire this off. This is the event I'm using to handle it. This thing over here, if I have this highlighted, you can see my inputs. And there is a cool trick. I don't need the game instance for this, but I'll clean that up later. Cool trick here is to say, let's say start countdown. I think, no, not that way. Set this. All right, here we go. This is clamping my maximum time, which on this one you can see is the level duration. So in the game instance, I'm going to drag this maximum time that I want to grab from the other level, because it'll be different every time. Drag it somewhere over this box and it'll add an input node here. And so that's going to be my max. I'm going to change that to current level duration. So now when I come back over here, it's got this new input pin. When I copied and pasted this over, one thing it does not do is keep your default value. I don't remember if you saw the other video, but I had like a 5-minute thing, so 300 for 300 seconds, because this timer is firing once a second. But for testing purposes, I put it down to 5 seconds just so that we could see. And it's not going to hurt anything because this isn't functional right now. It's kind of silly. We will leave it there just so that you can see at a glance what's going on. Okay, so I need to set this up in here. I don't need a game instance represent here. So I'm grabbing my test timer even though this is the right variable, it's from the game instance, so it's just the way that it's set up. I need to change. I can't use it, so I'll get rid of these. And now I need to set that timer. It's the same story. I wouldn't have that pin, and it's like this kind of thing wouldn't exist in this file, so it doesn't make sense to use it and it won't work, I believe. Let's see, move to 0, that's right. It's next level. When I drag this in, if I just hover over this, it'll automatically plug it into that. It's another way to do these a little quicker. So, feeding this in from the level, which means that every time I call this from any level, I can provide a value, and that'll change what this is, so each level can have different length. And on my map, this still should be set up. It's not going. I bet I am. Oh, I'm not calling it. Not what I was thinking. Try. We had that happen last time. It jumped down to 0. Default's 5. Minimum, maximum. Default's 5. It's a second. I'm starting the timer. Beginning of the level. Let me just try bumping it up and seeing if it's freaking out, because this happens faster than I see. Straight to 0. And it stayed at 5. So that's probably the problem somewhere. I'll open up the widget in a second in case it doesn't become obvious. I'm in the right map though. That close my game instance. Okay. So set it to 0. Which is not what I wanted. Set it to my clamped value. See if that goes. So when I disconnected that, I didn't hook up all the ends of that. I do want that one to be empty there. That's 0. I want the decrement just by 1. So if I went to a different level and had a different had that level blueprint call this one function in the same manner, it'd be like, hey, get the game instance, call that function, plug in 50 instead of 5, or whatever. I have it at 20, so that should be 20, not 5. Alright, one more time. Countdown timer is, I have the duration here. So the first thing I want to do with this timer, the first thing I want to do with this function before I start the timer is set, what is this thing? I want to set this. So my timer is going to initially be based on this duration. You can set this to as many places as you want. And from there, I don't want to loop over this thing, or else I'll just set it every time. So I set it, then I start my loop, then I come down. So now it knows to start it to test widget. Default is 5. Okay, the default's 5, but that's not what I'm doing. So now we're at 15, and it's counted down properly. So I was not setting this variable, it was using the default value, which was 5. So even though over here I'm saying my this level's duration is 15, I came here and this timer has its own idea of what the default is. It doesn't really need to have any particular value, but this could be an easy debug thing, keep it separate from something I would ever see. So then I start my timer, it loops, goes over it. The point of putting this in the game framework thing is that I had it on my character. The character and the level duration really aren't related at all. And now that I have this function in the game instance, every level can access the game instance. Every level can call this timer function and update that UI uniquely or dynamically for each level. So I still can't remember what I wanted to go over for the project settings, so I will leave it at this. Thanks.